boyo fucking alert. Fucking boyo alert. This is going to be an extrapolation of a massive idea that is ripping my head apart, ripping my soul apart, essentially. Like it's something that is a huge conflict within me that I don't know how to resolve, and I don't know which direction to go. And it's it's one of those things where you see it in yourself, and for some reason I'm starting to see it all over the world as well. So just before we get into it, check with voice mic. Is everything good there? Everybody got that? Any comments there? Say I sound good, you can hear me, all that stuff's good. Write and tell me. um this is about this huge divide I'm having within my heart and my head about what is the right way forward. What is the right way to, cheers California, thank you, what is the right way to to present yourself for the future? What was the right way to put your faith in? So this is going to involve a choice between what I think I've distilled it down to is the Christ idea versus the Lucifer idea. And the problem where for Christ, Lucifer is Satan, and for Lucifer, Christ is ignorance. And I don't really know how to resolve this. So this is basically distilled down into two massive movements that are going on in the world right now, and it boils down to this idea of the future. What type of future are we going to create? Because whatever future you've conceptualized, whatever kingdom in the future you've conceptualized, and how we reach that dictates your morality, dictates your religious system, and dictates all your actions. So if we are Christian, for example, we obey the prophecies within the Bible, and the conceptualization for the future is that God is going to come down and gift us the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so this frames evil and good in a very specific way. Good becomes sacrificing your will to God, so you're giving your will up to God, and accepting and having faith. And so good is faith in God's will, and evil is almost attempting to enact your will and to engage in power games and to damage people and try create the kingdom to a large extent. It kind of removes that off the table a lot. I'm finding that conflict in it now. So that would be obeying the Bible prophecy. And as I said before, I'm having massive trouble now because I'm starting to see evidence in the Bible that there was a higher power influencing that. So this is not only, it's not just trivial. It's like, oh, fucking Christians. It seems like it's got a legitimate backing somehow, which is scaring me. Now the problem there is that the opposite end, this is the movement that's dominant in the world right now, is this idea that we are sort of like, God is dead, but we're sort of stuck in this place in the world. It's sort of like, well, Earth is Earth, and we're just lumped here, and we don't really know what's going on. So what we have to do is we have to accept our fate and stop being delusional, and actually try to get the fuck out of our situation, go explore space and expand humanity before the Earth crumbles in and we destroy it with all our environmental toxins and being dirty parasitic animals. We need to continue the process of evolution. So that the whole thing we need to do to move forward is to move on to the next step. And so this is to awaken to our position, to accept our enlightenment, and to reach for the stars, to move forward. And this is positing this idea of our will create the future. It's a act of will. It's a choice. It's not waiting for God. Waiting for Godot, as Samuel Beckett said. It's now reaching for the kingdom ourselves with our own hands. And this is also an incredibly attractive, because I've read a lot of Nietzsche. This is what Nietzsche is saying when he says the Übermensch, who will reevaluate morality and move on into the future by himself. And this person pedestalizes will, and his evil then becomes anything that will keep us away from that kingdom. That evil is almost always ignorance. And this is interesting because it's Lucifer, enlightenment, the being of light. This type of thinking came out of the Enlightenment, that era of history. And so this whole character, this whole way of looking at the world is all about enlightenment and knowledge and self-knowledge and intuition and will based on that, deciding for yourself. But the problem is the evil that it is positing is ignorance. And that ignorance is conceptualized as people who have blind faith in superstitious other beings. And so the evil for the Luciferians are the Christians. They are the people who say it is not up to us to create the kingdom of Lucifer. That is in the hands of God. We must wait for them. Okay, so we have this Luciferian character, which is like we can do it ourselves. And the problem is that we grow up in this world with that enlightenment character as the dominant thing that we default into. And that's the thing that we get led by, the whole transhumanism trend, all the tech that we're building, even most of the social goals that we have. Like Elon Musk, he's like, God beast Elon Musk. And that's because he's pointing at Mars and saying, I'm going to go there. I'm like going to make it all the way up to Mars. I'm going to reach for that star. And so he's playing into this, what they often say is the Faustian soul, that desire to reach all the way to heaven. But the problem with this then is that it's positing a juxtaposition against the Christian one, because when the Christians look at this, a character that decides, I'm going to create the kingdom on earth with my own will, that is exactly what they see as Satan, and they exactly see that as the Antichrist. So they are literally like, whenever they see people making these energies and these attempts and this type of worldview, they're saying to themselves, well, fuck these motherfuckers. Like, these guys are clearly in league with Satan. They're like delusional, crazy bastards that want Satan to rule them, and they want to get led by him. And so you have that really intense problem where it's like, okay, so you need to have faith, or else you're submitting to Satan's will, or you need to go along with the crowd, because if there's here's the scary thing, right? So say I default into the Christian thing and I say, okay, cool, they're all just being satanic and they're just going to reach for the stars, and I'll stick with this, and hopefully God will come and save us all and grant us our faith. Then I hit into a problem where these guys who are doing the satanic thing, if they're not wrong, if they're actually living out something properly, they will continue to accumulate more resources and begin to become unbelievably powerful, and they will leave the people who chose ignorance behind. And so the future will be a positioning of these guys as like a new Ubermensch, a new higher species of human that will rule or even delete. This is where it becomes scary now. Will delete the lower classes. So that starts to scare me a little bit. Is that like, okay, damn, what happens if this is wrong, or this thing is powerful? This is challenging God, of course. So this is a dangerous thing for the Christians, but I'm trying my best to steel man both sides. What if this is wrong, and it's just accepting a sort of Nietzschean will to ignorance? And so these things, this Luciferians, they go off and they like build super machines that support them, and then they take over the world, and then bang, I'm fucked. I'm like a lower class for 10,000 years, possibly forever. That type of situation. These two massive conflicts are really starting to grow in me, and I'm starting to hit on them. And I believe this is something that is ripping apart the soul of mankind as it is. I really think this is something that is really going on. And these questions we're pushing forward with the Luciferian thing. We have all of our best minds working on this Luciferian thing, and it's getting pushed ahead without question. People are streaming forward towards AI without question at all. Like, all of Silicon Valley and all that is organized towards this. And this seems to be the goal that people are aiming for. But then the problem about this is that what the Christians are saying, and the people who are holding back are saying, why do you think that you can solve our problems with technology? And this is another layer to this problem. The Christians are saying, okay, if you want to save the world, you don't, or you want to create the kingdom, you don't do it by building it with tech. It's to do with the problem of evil. The problem of evil is not a lack of knowledge. It's not a machine we haven't built with. We don't live in a fallen world of evilness because we don't have enough tech, or because we don't have enough insight. It's because the world itself has a psychological energy in it, which is evil itself. It's Satan's voice, and it possesses us all. And the only way we can create a true kingdom is by going into ourselves and cleansing ourselves of that essence. We need to delete that, and we need to actually spend our time deleting that and wait for God to come and properly take us out of this situation. And so this is another dark side to the Luciferians. It's like these guys keep on pushing forward with this idea of the machine, or building the great future, or whatever they're trying to do, and say they create like a massive AI machine rocket that can go all around space, and they don't deal with this problem of evil, which is a psychological reality, as opposed to in the world. They hit a massive problem where they will actually create a machine that they program their own unresolved psychological evil into. And then what they've done is they've literally empowered Satan of sorts. And I see the way these transhumanists talk about the world is that they say they want to create like whatever that dude is on about the singularity. He's saying that when the singularity comes, what's going to happen is you're going to have this opportunity to offer people an upload into virtual reality. They're going to say, okay, cool, I'll put you into virtual reality. We'll put you all into virtual reality, and you'll upload your consciousness into it. All right. So that's a Christian idea. Like, that is a religious idea. That is the kingdom of God in heaven, and you're going to upload your consciousness into that. That's the same idea as God coming down and taking your soul and lifting it off in heaven. It's mind blowing how this stuff still matches. It's archetypical, you know. And so he was asked, what do you think about God? You think he's real? And he was like, not yet. He was like, we're going to make it. And the God is going to be a unification of all consciousness together. So we're going to build this sort of strange machine, and everybody's going to get uploaded into it. And then all of that whole machine will contain all consciousness, and that will create this God heaven paradise. Because once consciousness unifies together, it's like an orgasm beyond anything sexual that's possible. It's like total union of spirit in essence. So it is sort of spiritual in a crazy way. And then they're talking about building that, and that is heaven. That is the paradise they're offering. But then the scary thing I see in that is that if they are wrong, because it's almost like the assumption underneath that is that evil, the thing that makes life bad or terrible, is within your body. It's inside your actual matter. It's in that. And if we can shed that off and move us out of this fallen biological machine that forces us to fight and fuck, and inject it into this machine that's purely sort of astral in a sense, or psychic by the very least, we'll all have this like pregnant like, you know, super paradise at the end of time, a new Garden of Eden. But the problem with this is that if they are wrong about that premise, and evil is not in the body, but it is in fact in consciousness, like the Christians say, what they'll do is they will push forward this Luciferian agenda. They might even kill all the ignorant Christians in order to get them out of the way, and then upload themselves into this thing. But the problem is, because conscious or evil was in their consciousness itself, what they will do is they will upload evil into this thing, and then there'll be no escaping. And what have you done there? You've created an eternal hell that everybody who goes into will be stuck there forever. What the fuck does that mean? And so then it comes down to that problem of which side is right, because one side seems to have the unbelievably irresistible amount of power in the world and is shoving forward with its will bluntly, and it doesn't seem like it's going to stop, and it's going to keep going. And then the other side is being more sincere and realistic about the positioning of evil and the true nature of our problems. Our problems are not lack of resources or economic or technological, as people often say. Like, does scarcity really make us monsters, or is it some type of inability to deal with our psyche that makes us monsters? And so the Christians are proposing this. I'm going to read some comments now because we've got a lot here. All good. Following God is not forsaking your will, but aligning your will with God's. Interesting point. So aligning your will with God. So that would be about recognizing what God's plan is and then following that. So this is where it becomes a bit weird for me, because I think to add in the occult stuff behind the Luciferian agenda that seems to be going on is that there's this idea that there's a God of this world. Like, what do you consider God? This is another fucking problem. Like, what do you consider God? What is God's will? How do you know God's will? A lot of people would propose the Bible tells us God's will, and as I said, that's becoming clearer and clearer that there's something very, 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 very true about that. There's something very profound about the Bible. So yeah, so you're aligning your will with God is like reading the Bible and obeying that, but that still is about subverting your ignorance and not deciding we're going to create our future instead of being stuck in that ignorance. And this is where Nietzsche comes in, and he's a very, very hard writer. Is that he says the reason there it's very strange that you trust Christianity, because Christianity is almost like only suitable for people who don't have the power or the internal sense of creativity to actually make a future for themselves. So they need to subvert to something. It has to happen. Whereas the really great people who built civilizations were all crazy barbarians who had a sense of the future, and that they wanted to challenge destiny and the concepts of God and all that, and they did that. And and that's what that energy is something that a great man has. And just because you're Christian and submitting to God's will and all that doesn't necessarily mean that you're absolutely right. It's maybe just something that is about you, that you need to do that because you're not great like them. And so this is where Nietzsche's like kind of cooking me a bit. I'm like, am I like, what does that mean? The only reason I'm contemplating this stuff is because I'm not great enough to participate as the leader in the Luciferian movement? Is that what it is? Like, if I was on top of that, would I really waste my time thinking about this stuff? If you had the backing of the entire political movement, and it was pushing you towards creating this great machine, would you really be so morally attentive? But then again, we look at people like Elon Musk, and he clearly fucking is, like, so it's confusing. But yeah, it again comes down to the idea of what is God and what does he want, and why don't we know if this Luciferian agenda is God? Maybe God put us here and was like, you fucking idiots, go figure it out for yourself. I'm trying to incubate you into great people. Like, I've put you in this universe, and it's like an egg, and now you have to evolve into its highest level. And maybe the savagery of life is actually part of that. Maybe the savagery of life is like, all right, we need to kill off the weak in order to create the strongest being, and then that will be the apotheosis of the universe, and God will be happy. Like, is there that energy in it? Is this universe fundamentally evil, and God's plan, like, evil is there almost like as God's as his scalpel in order for crafting off the weak, the disgusting parts of things? Like, is this like this big? It's the universe a big blob of clay that God is like crafting into an Ubermensch of sorts? Is that what's going on? And is therefore the our will that burns within us, our libido, is that the voice of God calling us onto greatness? And the reason why, like, things like Christianity and religions exist is because people failed to obey that. It's not strong enough, and so they're part of the stuff that gets shaved off. It's a challenging idea. I think you present a false dialect. True knowledge is found by aligning your will with God's will. There's no contradiction or tension between scientific and self-knowledge and the will of God. There's no contradiction or tension between scientific and self-knowledge and the will of God. Well, what's the will of God? Are you sure science doesn't conflict with the will of God? Doesn't science specifically state that idea of we are stuck in ignorance and we must get enlightened slowly but surely? It's almost like science is trying to discover God in many senses. But see, the first premises of science is that you can't take things on superstition. They must be evidence based. And I think the will of God, like science is as well. Well, I guess to argue your point, like, science is not in any way a plan; it's merely a method. So maybe the will of God can be here, and science can serve that to some extent. But is that how it really operates? Perhaps is the question. And Mr. Coolmug, Christianity isn't a default; it's a conscious choice you have to make or reject. It's what do you mean by default, my man? What do you mean by default? Um, I've thought about this a lot. I've come up to realize that there is nothing higher. There is no higher virtue or truth or goodness other than the Christian faith. I'm actually, yeah, like, in order to steel man this side of it again, like, Christianity seems to have the most pronounced understanding of evil. I really think this Luciferian thing that I'm talking about here, which seems to be the dominant religion in the world right now. This is what I'm describing here, seems to be the dream that we are following as a society. And I see quite a lot of people incubated in the Christian one. And the challenge here is that both of these value systems are fundamentally opposed. Christianity sees anything Luciferian as satanic, and any attempt at creating the Luciferian man, the genetically engineered Superman who is like supported by an artificial intelligence. That is the Antichrist, that is the manifestation of that thing that they warned against. And more so, you've got this problem where it's like these guys see the backwards Christians who are too fucking cocked by God to leap forward into the future as a serious problem. And I think I've described this before. Here is my teachings, people, is that humans need to have a pedestalized value. They need to value something above everything else. And what's astounding is that when they value something above everything else, they can sacrifice everything else for that something. It's a really intense part of human nature, but it is fundamentally true. And everywhere you see people holding up a pedestalized value, they sacrifice things for that reason. This is why Christianity is so intense, is that it inverts that, says God sacrificed himself for you. You were the most valuable. Crazy idea. But like a terrorist is sacrificing his life for the sake of Allah's life. A mother sacrificed sacrificed herself for the sake of a child, and we sacrifice ourselves every day for the sake of our family and all that. And so if you believe in the Ubermensch Luciferian kingdom on earth built by us, that's the solution to defeating evil. And usually always at the bottom of your pedestal values, evil is almost always the opposite or the thing in the way of you getting this value. And so you would look at all the Christians, all the ones who sit in ignorance, as worth sacrificing, but also obstacles towards achieving this great good of the kingdom on earth. And so you would justifiably sacrifice them. And then the Christians on the flip side, it's not quite as intense there, but the Christians on the flip side are willing to even sacrifice themselves for the sake of this. They are willing to give in to God's will so much that like these Luciferian guys could swamp around them and say, agree with us or we will kill you because you're in the way. And then the Christians would be like, well, we're not going to disobey God, so kill us. And then bang, you've got the fucking Christians thrown in the Colosseums with lions again. And you see how those tension points are so strong that I'm sort of getting a little bit freaked out by the possibility of this stuff coming in the future. Like, why, if this religion doesn't get strong enough, because what's weird about many of our moral values, as Nietzsche said, is that they are literally echoes of Christianity. But when you suck out the Christian worldview, you suck out God and the metaphysical space, morals become secular morals, and secular morals have no grounding at all. They're literally just like a sort of a lie you tell yourself. And eventually that stuff is going to pepper out and cave, and we're going to be stuck where we have people who have got a belief in the spiritual world, and then they can ground their morals there. And then the people who don't have a spiritual world, they'll have to ground their morals in the dark side of reality, which is fucking reality. And that's pagan, blood sacrifice, brutality, monstrous stuff is again, and that's you're back in Rome, where like, killing is back on the table and life is cheap. And what are we going to do about that? Because these two cultural forces are, it's not like we control them. These two cultural forces are tension points in the collective unconscious that need to resolve themselves, and they will not resolve themselves until it's almost like, I've said this before, history is like a war of ideas, a war of memes, and humans are like the cannon fodder. Like when two nations go to war, it's almost like the ideas are fighting against each other and their bullets are fucking people. It's like dang, 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 they're all dying. And so, well, these two massive ideas they're reaching war point now. Like, I see that tension growing stronger. The Luciferians are like, we must fucking get out. We must fucking get out. The Christians are we must have faith. We must have faith. Is there going to be a challenge, a massive, massive war in regards to this? Interesting stuff. And so, yeah, I think Christianity has a very sophisticated conceptualization of evil, which is astounding about it. If you care about truth, goodness, virtue, then Christ is the only option. You can try dodge it. I've tried. Why don't you try it and see the results? To be honest, a lot of what I'm doing here are intellectual exercises per se. I think, I think I'm a Christian in behavior. Do you know the way Jordan Peterson's always like, oh, why do you know I act Christian? Because it's not obvious I'm not Christian or God's real. But I'm sort of that type of sense. Like I definitely am. I read the fucking Bible. I call out to Christ. That's who I believe in. But I'm still playing with these big ideas, almost as if I want to know the mind of humanity. Because I'm very interested as an artist. So a lot of this stuff is tensions I feel in myself. and worries I have about following on with that stuff. But I think I default into this because I understand the reality of psychology being primary, and Christians do the best at dealing with that. But I also fear deeply that there's something there could be something very, very naive about denying the true nature of evil. And yeah. If the Christians are so good, why did they put thousands of fellow Europeans to the sword? Colonial Wolf. Did they put thousands of fellow Europeans to the sword? What would that have been? Um, Uploading your consciousness to a computer is not Christian. It's anti-Christian with a capital A. It's good old-fashioned hubris. So it's hubris is what I'm getting on. The Luciferians have got like a big shot of hubris, and it's exactly what the Christians conceptualize as satanic and evil. But again, hubris is wrapped in with this idea of self-belief and courage. And to the Luciferians, they see all these things as virtues, and they see the Christians' lack of hubris as cowardice, or even patheticness, or just willful blindness. And that's an interesting challenge. The kingdom of heaven is beyond this world, and it cannot be made by men. See, the problem then when it cannot be made by men is that there's an astounding amount of evidence that life has gotten a lot better since the Enlightenment happened. Like we've solved things like hunger and all that stuff. And it's like a little bit of Lucifer was a very, very good thing. It allowed us to create the modern world. But what do we do when we follow Luciferianism to its logical conclusion? And it leads us past the modern world into the super modern world, where we're flying into fucking space as robot alien beasts, and these things are monsters, and we're uploading ourselves to super computers and shit like that. And these things are just astoundingly big problems. And what's interesting is that this dream that I'm describing here is in the heads of most of the people leading the fucking world. Now, what do we do about that? Because these people are going to push forward with this agenda anyway. And is it really, really smart to just stay Christian and stay out of it, and then get fucking murdered by these guys when we become enough of a problem? Boyo, you've brought into the fashions of this world. Evil is not ontologically material. This is a Gnostic concept. Yes, Gnosticism is about knowing, is about knowledge. It's the same problem. It's that same idea of where do you base evil? Do you base evil fundamentally in our biology, or is it in reality, in matter, in Mother Nature, or is it in our consciousness, is it in our psyche? Is it metaphysical? Is it a war between Christ and Satan within our souls? What's going on with that? Yeah, like that's the question. Like I would lean on the Christian side and say evil is psychologically potent and real, and you need to defeat it in yourself. But there is something quite monstrous about reality as well. And this is a hard thing. It's like, do you condemn reality? When you look out into the world and you see that, like, what is a person? Only you're sort of like a beast with a drive, a monstrous drive in you that craves violence and libido and sex and brutality. And that is the fundamental baseline nature of life, is that it is a brutal, violent monster. And the lion wins and kills the gazelle, and there's nothing the gazelle can do about it. And there's all the gazelle can do is say the lion is evil, the same way as like the Christian would say that the Luciferian is evil. But the lion doesn't think that way. The lion is saying, I'm just expressing my power fully. And this is like the reality of nature. This is also the other problem, is like, is Christianity a denial of that nature? This is Nietzsche's challenge. Is it a denial of that nature? It's hard to know. Yeah, Colonial Wolf. I'm not too sure what you meant about the Christians are so good. So fucking giving out what the Christians now, are we? They put fellow Europeans to the sword. I think the Christendom endeavor was this attempt to take this. So we had these purer souls like the Nordic barbarians, and they had this strong barbaric libido where they'd run around into Rome, and they were tall, monstrous people, and they go in and they'd like rape the women and then kill everything, and they were just like savages, and they all lived in small huts, tribal huts in trees, and they practiced sacrifice and stuff like that. And the whole conception of Christianity was that they'd bring in this new way of looking at the world, which was about internalizing the mind of these barbarians onto themselves and try and getting them to incubate that libido and channel it into something higher and more powerful. And this is Nietzsche's critique of slave morality. Like, people think Nietzsche often hated slave morality, but that's not true. Nietzsche was always saying that the masters had this abundance of power, but they could never direct it properly. They were almost like slaves to it in many ways, in a really ironic way. They simply could only be essentially like noble animals. But slaves would have weaker libidos, but for that reason they could actually control it. So the slaves could, over like many generations, really really work on getting to the top of society by like not being stoic and being unemotional. And when like a master would say, "Oh, you're a pathetic slave," they wouldn't freak out. They'd smile and say, "I am, sir." And then they go home and they plot and say, "But in 10 years I will fucking kill the shit out of you." You know what I mean? And so they could control that. And then from their controlling of that with the Jewish people, pretty much they incubated a way of being that was about playing the long-term game. And that created a way of thinking that eventually led to Christianity. It was like those ideas incubated into an actual new philosophy that was even beyond what the Jews invented, and that was purely taking these useful tactics, such as holding your tongue for a decade and winning, and to turning that into like a sort of spiritual virtue. And so then you got Christianity, and then Christianity comes around and goes to these barbarians in the north and puts it on them. So these barbarians have this fiery libido, this very Luciferian, satanic, desiring libido, and the Christians slap it on that and forces these really potent men to internalize their emotions and look at themselves and develop that energy into creating something. And so many people would say that when you look at pagan Europe, it was kind of shit until Christianity came along and taught the pagans how to deify logos above their emotions, and that's when they started building great Europe. Which is an interesting challenge, because you get a lot of people talking about paganism being like, yeah, fucking paganism and all that. And it's like, it's not until Christianity took the amazing energy of the Europeans and channeled it properly using this slave morality system, did it become strong, did it become, shall we say, refined and great. But then Nietzsche's critique is that once the Christian morality sunk its teeth in, it did that job of the energy was fiery, the libidos were strong and fiery, and then Christianity channeled them. But then eventually it became so channeled that it got weak and fell apart again, and that's what we're going through now. And so this is a problem for me as well, is that, like, is Christianity simply just a psychological tool that worked to do that? Is it nothing more? Like, maybe we deify it, but is it simply because that's how it worked? It worked that effectively, but that does that necessarily mean it's like godlike or true? Maybe we're at a point now where we need to get back in touch with that libido and reach for the future somehow. Christendom has been the longest lasting, most inventive, most influential, and most dominant civilization on the planet. Nietzsche is against goodness and truth. Nietzsche would agree that he's against goodness. I don't think he's against truth, though. I think he's trying his best for truth. But I think Nietzsche's failings, my man, is that the premises he accepted dictated his whole life. So he accepted that there's no such thing. He accepted the Darwinian evolution model, and he accepted there's no such thing as a higher power. And so he had to explain life to himself, and the only way he could say it is it's this blunt, fiery libido, like I'm describing, inside the balls of the barbarians, this monstrous snake beast that makes them want to like go kill things and take everything and then make like a nice city out of it. It was he had to reduce life down into that. He couldn't say that there was a noble side to life, because he had to get rid of the concept of higher beings and deified things. And so Nietzsche was definitely looking for the truth, but the premises he accepted were dragging him out of that, if you know what I mean. They were saying he couldn't entertain the idea of a spirituality at all, and that was something he was completely against. He hated the idea of he used to always say, we are done with this idea of other worlds, they don't exist. But what's weird is that when we got into the 20th century, we started to confirm via science that things like other dimensions exist, and then slowly people started to kind of start to get into this new age thing where there's like, there's a spiritual world, man, but it's not Christian. There's no God there. No, 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 definitely not. But it's still a spiritual world, man. And so this becomes interesting, is that you were starting to put this idea back on the table, and everybody's becoming pagan again. That involves this belief in another world, but then that sort of invalidates Nietzsche to an extent, and so yeah, Nietzsche pushed for the truth, but he lost that. But Nietzsche is like the prophet of the Antichrist. Like, he fucking wrote a book called The Antichrist. Like, and this is what I mean. He's like the prophet for this Luciferian thing. This is the thing with Nietzsche. This is why I like him so much, is because he's just being sincere. It's like, when you accept these premises that there is no God and there is no other world and all that shit, and you accept our reality and where we are, you fall into the Luciferian thing. And the Luciferian thing is not some secular Christianity that we're living in now, where it's like, oh, we'll create an empathetic world. This is the problem with it, is people are like, okay, right, what we're going to do is we're going to create this empathetic and nice guy world where everything's going to be all right, and build this tech utopia where everything's fair and everybody loves each other. And it's like, those conclusions don't work. If you strip out the metaphysical kingdom of heaven, there's no place to put this morality. And so what happens is your morals fall into the earth with you. And so the only way you can ground a morality is by lifting up a pedestalized ideal. And if that pedestalized ideal turns out to be the kingdom, the tech utopia kingdom, and the Ubermensch who makes it, the great man who makes that stuff, then you can sacrifice everything for that extent, and bang, you're into that really difficult problem where human life is no longer valuable. And that's what Nietzsche was saying. People try to cuck Nietzsche so much. They try to say he was a nice guy. Man, he said some fucking ruthless shit. There's one quote from The Antichrist where he's like, our charity will involve fuck, I'm not going to get the quote right, but he essentially says our charity will be about killing, or about not pitying the pity. It'll be about killing them, helping them die. That's what it is. He will help them die. It's that idea of like getting rid of the weak, because it's to live. The only way you can be happy is to be strong. So the nicest thing you can do for the weak is to kill them off. That's what life wants. And it's a complete disavowment of consciousness as valuable and as humanity as valuable. And it's a deification of evolution. And the whole premise of evolution is that you need to lead evolution somewhere now. Like, evolution is a blunt force. Now you need to take control of it. Like the way you took control of cows and evolved them, selected them into bigger cows. Now we need to take humans and evolve them into greater humans, beyond humans, trans-humans, if you will. And these premises are incredibly powerful, because once you accept them, you have to follow them to their conclusion. And Nietzsche's conclusion it's hard-hitting, heavy stuff. He writes eloquent justifications for his own warped sense of reality. So this is it. Like, if he's right within the context of what he says, but his premises are the things you need to challenge, and they're hard to challenge, because like, one of them is there another world? Like, fuck, dude, that's a big leap. And if there is another world, who lives in it? Is evolution real? Is what's the nature of the reality we live in? These are the premises Nietzsche are acting on. But Nietzsche is just honest enough. He's honest enough to strip out Christian morality when he wants to talk about reality. Like, he can have it both ways, and he got that. And so he deserves kudos for that reason. But he most certainly could be wrong. And the more I get into it, the more I see that he's only right for the Luciferian ideals. How do I present a false dialect? He writes, blah, blah, blah. God is a person, and his will has to be revealed. Like in scriptures, God is the source of all creativity. He's created all reality without reference. You present a false dialect. Look at the Byzantines. God is a person, and his will is to be revealed. I'm sure that is what that premise is for the Christians. So you say a false dialect. Like, are you saying that when I'm talking about these Luciferians, these people who deify the will to power, and I'm presenting them against the Christians, is that a false dialect? Because I see that as a true tension point that I have worry and predictions about in the future. I don't see how these things can sort themselves out. Like, you can't have people who deify will and people who deify faith, and the people who deify will start seeing the people who deify faith as a problem. and that will lead to, oh, lions for you guys. Like it's these tension points are getting strong, man. So that's what I'm getting at here. Evil is not material, but it is a move away from God, who is the source of all truth and reality. Oh, but Jesus. Oh my God, many questions, many questions. Sam Music Fiction. How you doing, sir? Oh, sorry, Gabriel, skipped over one there. Oh, be the Jesus Lord, boyos. Fucking boyos. Science is a method. I'm addressing the belief that boyo that science can bring us into the kingdom of God. Yes, yes. If accept that the Christian faith has a monopoly on virtue, truth, and why have you the dilemma? Why aren't you siding with truth, goodness, and virtue? This is again Nietzsche's challenge: is that Christianity seems to have a monopoly on the tools to deal with yourself, but is that necessarily the essence of reality? Like, what is going on? What is going on with the outside world? I'm having problems where I need to accept that God's will is written into a prophetic book like the Bible. That means I can't just throw out parts of the Bible that are inconvenient with me. And, and the Bible says that the earth is flat. So, like, what the fuck do I do there? Like, so, like, if I'm going to accept all these premises, I'm going to a very scary fucking place. So, I don't know what to do about it, man. It's ripping me apart. But yes, it's like Christianity. I think what I'm trying to give Christianity definitely is that it is a very powerful way of dealing with yourself. I really like that. And then this idea of God's will being written to the Bible and dealing with reality, it's like there's just a few other things, a few other humps I have to get over. So give me time, my man. Fucking hard questions from Mr. Cool Mug as always. Misuse science goes against God because it forsakes and attacks the revealed truth of God. So this is I think this is a common misconception that if you misuse science, science is a blunt neutral force. Science it's a tool. Like, to misuse it is a comment on the morality of how you use it. You can do science wrong. That's not necessarily misusing it. That's just being a fucking spastic. Like, you're not doing science right. But misusing science would be like building a nuke. You know what I mean? Is that misusing science? Well, of course it is, if your morality says dropping nukes on motherfuckers is bad. But if you're Nietzschean and you're like thinking like a high level aristocrat, and this is what I guess I'll get into this now. Yeah, see, I'm Colonial Wolf. I'm going to talk about, yeah, that's a brilliant point that I want to get into now. The aristocracy has never been Christian. This is really interesting. This is another massive tension point. If your conception of morality is that the lower, like that people are expendable and you can sacrifice things, why do you think you can misuse science by building a nuke and a bomb? It's not misusing it at all. It coordinates with your morality. So science is almost completely useless when it comes to us making moral judgments. Moral judgments are almost dreamlike. They're psychological and based on our imagination, and these things are problematic because our moral judgments are guided by the Bible on one hand and the belief in God's will, and then when you strip that away from people, they fall into this Luciferian idea of like, well, we need to will a future for ourselves. Like, what do we want that future to be like? And many people say, well, it'll be like a Christian utopia, but there'll be no Christianity. And Nietzsche says, you're full of shit. That's not what works. Instead, it's going to be a Ubermensch utopia, and we're going to kill all the weak people in order to get it. It's like, fuck, crazy shit. Have you read Age of Reason by Thomas Paine? It offers a good critique of the Bible. I have not, sir. I will look into it. The aristocracy has never been Christian. And then we are immediately getting that's just a LARP pagan interpretation of history. LARP, I can't pronounce that properly. The fact is, we were Christian civilization for over a millennium. So this is a problem. This is again Nietzsche's good critique of Christianity. He's a motherfucker for doing this. The aristocracy have always operated beyond good and evil, as he described them. So it's almost like this idea that you need to give Christianity to the people, and the idea behind Christianity is that that they need to have faith in God's will. And then the aristocrats are like the political realists at the top who realize that people have to die in order to maintain complicated states. And so what they do is they've got this consent from these people on the lower classes who are like, I believe in God, I have faith. And then you have these divine rights of kings, people saying, God speaks through me and I will lead you. And so the aristocracy have always led that way. And this is challenging because maybe Christianity has worked for most people, but does that mean that the aristocracies have always operated in this like evil wavelength? Have they always been sort of operating through these pagan morals, these maybe pagan is wrong, but these Luciferian morals? Have the elites been leading themselves through a sort of Luciferian paradigm? And this plays into this idea of people always conceptualize the elites as evil, as closer to Satan than anybody. And it's that idea of power corrupts. And this actually all falls into an interesting frame where Jesus himself confessed that in order to be a ruler, you do, in essence, need to be satanic to a large extent. In order to enact your will in this world, you need to a large extent, sacrifice your ability to be close to God, and you need to accept Satan into your heart more. You need to be more dark. And it's the Machiavelli truth. And so are the aristocrats more evil than us? And then there's a bigger problem. It's like, well, why should we hate them for that? Like, maybe they're more evil than us, but is that not the sacrifice they had to make in order to be leaders? Like, to be a leader, is it not to accept more evilness and do the things that other people couldn't do? It's like that Batman dilemma. It's the hero we need, not the one we deserve, or some shit like that. It's like, like, does an aristocrat realize that, okay, I'm going to have to go and kill a small village there and murder loads of women just to send a message to that big empire over there? And it's very unchristian to do, but fuck, I'll have to do it in order to remain, to keep all this whole thing stable. And is that the burden they're taking on themselves? Are they taking on this like burden of being evil? And so maybe some of them would be Christian and think that way. They're sort of living out God's will. But are there other ones that are like Christian, but behind the scenes they're actually acting pagan? Or is it a situation where the god of this world is Satan, the demiurge, and we like, power involves obeying him, and so ever having power is going to involve Satanism? And then does that mean the Christians must always forego power? And does that cause a serious problem? Because then Christians are never going to get into the high echelons of power, because it's a moral race to the bottom. And so the people who always ascertain power are always going to be these more Luciferian types. And so does that mean that no matter what happens, eventually in history, there's going to be this peak capture of power of Luciferians who are going to have the backing of monstrous machines as well? This is what we're going into now. And well, Satan's going to come to life then. What the fuck do we do then? And it's going to be a bloodbath. And yeah, pagan Rome was greater than Christian Europe. And so this is Nietzsche's argument. He's like, Rome was awesome, but then Christianity comes in and says, like, preaches its message, which is about humbling yourself and putting that slave morality on the master energy. And so Rome collapses to a large extent. Yeah, when Christianity came in, it was on its downturn. And then the Renaissance was this sort of, it was like a fake Christianity. It was like a load of Europeans being like, yeah, we're Christian, but we've got a lot of style as well. And Nietzsche loved that. And then he hated the Protestant movement, because what the Protestant movement was, went back to the Bible and grounded stuff again. And Nietzsche was like, we had a great thing going with the Renaissance. Look at all the fucking churches and shit like that. And see, you can't say you don't like that stuff, because when you bop around Italy and all that, like, you love the churches, like, you love the Sistine Chapel. It's beautiful beyond belief. So what do we do about that? Like, it's like, it's not like obeying these satanic forces didn't produce beautiful things. And you can put that down to Christianity, but it is about serving the monstrous energy in the root of it. And this is Nietzsche's challenge, is that, like, okay, well, look at the baseline results. I know we're calling about the other worlds, but take out the other worlds and look at the first principles, the baseline results of obeying the satanic forces. You get Rome, you get the Sistine Chapel, you get, like, a beautiful woman is a satanic thing. Like, great Alexander the Great's empire was a satanic thing. There's a problem there, because your instincts when you're in the presence of these things are beautiful, and Christianity is always telling you to sacrifice that for the sake of faith in something that's invisible. And so it's like, what if that is a delusion? I don't know, man. Much scientific and artistic progress was achieved during the Dark Ages. It was only called that by the cult of the reason movement called the Enlightenment, which misplaced the use of the intellect. Fair point, dude. Like, the Dark Ages were not dark at all, as well. Yeah, Ireland was a really important place during the Dark Ages. We took all the knowledge in and incubated the we incubated the energy, the scholastic energy, the ability to analyze documents that got us ready for the Renaissance. So you're right. It's sort of like a wave thing. It's like you go up in peak aesthetics and you fall down back into peak of logos, and then it comes back to peak aesthetics. Then the Enlightenment comes, it's peak logos, and then you have Hitler. The Dark Ages were dominated by pagan Vikings. What does modern life lack? It lacks truth, sincerity, honesty, virtue, goodness. So the Bible teaches us that lacking these things will result in destruction. Are we headed for? Does modern life lack truth, sincerity, honesty, virtue, and goodness? Are we sure about that? It's like the system, the machine we're building is suspicious. I do not disagree. There's something monstrous about it. The machine we're building is, it's like led by pedophiles, as they say, and it's aiming for this tech utopia. And you're like, is this right? Is this thing is glorious. It's like the modern world will say, the modern infrastructure, architecture, and all that. Like there's something amazing and grand about it. It's not quite aesthetic in the way that the Renaissance was, but there's still something very grand about the modern world. But there does seem to be coded in it a very suspicious will to falsity and to lies and to delusion, like you see with the internet censorship and all that stuff. And so, and then modern life does involve this sort of taking yourself away from nature. Like I live in a like fucking city room, and it's like it's very rare for me to touch grass, and it's like I'm there's so much interaction with screens. You're like, are a lot of these things, this is the things we accept as great progress, but have they actually been great progress? Like I have this reach now where I can talk to hundreds of people about these ideas, and these are far out fucking ideas, but that was sort of expense that like all my friends have moved out of Ireland. They've all like spread all around the world because you can travel now and all that shit. And like it's the traveling's good and the tech is good, but you're starting to you lose the community thing. The communities, I've always found the communities fragment really fast in the modern world. And no one's really stable. No one's really based and grounded and said, "I'm going to sit down here and build something long term." It's all very fickle, and that fickleness is a little bit scary. Yes, but I would loathe to say it lacks truth, sincerity, and honesty. I do think there are a lot of very honest and authentic people in the modern world using these things in an authentic way. I guess that's what I'm saying. Um, did you hear about the hotel that was burned down in Roscommon? I did not, Matchoon. I did not. Sounds lovely. Hello, Daniel. Boyo, if you doubt they put euros to the sword, look up the Teutonic Order for just one example. Okay, I'll check it out, my man. Um, I, w- I wouldn't doubt it. Like I wouldn't like you've got like the Inquisition and all that stuff, but can you rest that squarely on Christians, or was it this sort of like, was it really the Christians? Could it have been the elites, like the Inquisition, that had a very specific agenda in mind? Like is that really the Christian ethos, or was this a set of elites who were adopting the Christian ethos and adapting it to whatever circumstance they needed? Boyle Fox, self worth and self esteem and self defense are all different from hubris. Hubris is an arrogant overbelief in yourself. In this case, the creations of men. Yeah, so this is my challenge. Like, where do you put great art? Because great art is a creation of man, but it's also a creation of God. The great artist almost perceives God. and presents it to us. So like that's a very hard thing to conceptualize. Like, where do you place great art? And so, you know what I mean? Like, great art is extremely valuable. And if we're going to call that hubris, we're sacrificing one of the greatest things about us, probably the greatest thing about us. And then you're in a problem there with like, oh, in order to be properly Christian, you must sacrifice great art, like the way the Protestants were like, you must sacrifice these great churches and all that shit, because this is the shit of Satan. Like it was by definition. It's the honoring of will, your ability to create something godlike. But like when you're in the presence of something astoundingly beautiful like the Sistine Chapel, it heals your fucking soul, because it reminds you that, yeah, you live in a fallen world, but it's incredible the amount of beauty in it as well. And it's the same idea with woman. Like, she is so beautiful. It's, or even a juicy young boyo. It's like peak aesthetics are healing. They have catharsis. It's very Greek in that conceptualization. It's like, is that a consequence of hubris? Elon Musk's Neuralink sounds amazing, unlimited memory, pretty much. Yeah, but you're fucking plugging in this Luciferian shit into you. So, say if you Neuralink, and then they go out and they're like, all right, we're gonna kill all the Christians now because they're fucking annoying us. And then it's like you're like, oh, I like Christianity. They're like, all right, we'll go get you. Or maybe they'll brainwash you into loving Satan, Lucifer. Like, what's going on there? And see, Satan was also the most talented among the gods. Um, Satan was the most glorious. He was the lead musician, and his hubris was that he thought he could run the show on his own. And so this is where I see perhaps a slightly resolution thing, is that this Luciferian idea is the soul of man. It is the fallen soul of man, that we want to have this unlimited power, but we need to bend our knee. We need to be the prodigal son to a large extent. So maybe it is about accepting our satanic Luciferian nature and somehow uniting that with Christ. This is something me and James will get into when we get into the Ion lectures a bit more, is that Christ and Satan, Antichrist and Christ are dichotomized, but maybe these archetypes, the return of the Christ and the Antichrist, maybe that's when you've got this archetype of ultimate Christ, like Jesus, good, will return and meet the archetype of the Antichrist and unify into a new being that will be or a new symbol of the self that will be noble, that will be a unification of both. It will be Satan back in tune with the fucking symphony. But that's a fucking scary idea, because I'm saying, yeah, we're gonna redeem Satan, and it's like, is that really the end goal? Like, is that like, where, can you really tell Christians that? Does that not sound even a little bit satanic? And there's that challenging point there, But yeah, like I guess what I'm trying to say with this stream, what got me to start the stream, is that I see these two massive tension points, and I don't see how they're going to resolve. They're going to end up at fucking war. And it's almost like the prophecy of Revelation is about the unification of those two ideals. But is it also the war of those two ideals? It's hard to know, It's hard to know. I guess I'm being like, boyo alert, Lucifer, Christ, who will win? Everyone's on this side. What are you willing to take that risk? To put Europeans to the sword for many reasons, but you don't even address them. You just say they put. So to talk about colonial wolves thing, is that there was this thing where they once the Christians came in, they started to kill the most violent, the bottom 1% most violent people every year. And so that would have done is slightly reduced the testosterone levels and the libido levels and the violence levels of the populations, and like favored selections for more logos orientated people. And that may have over time incubated the Christians to be the great, create the great nations that they did, but also led to their downfall, because they got more cuckish as time went on. So maybe yes, the Christians took the Europeans to the sword and like started to slightly castrate them or cut one of their balls off or something like that. Um, but like, it could have contributed to good stuff, but it also could have been bad. It's hard to know. Many Christian saints were highly intellectual and used intellectual arguments, proving the Christian Christ. Properly faced reason has no choice but to lead towards God, the creator of reason. No, I think reason. I'm not sure, my man. I'm not sure about this. Colonial. Damn, shots getting fired. Clarissa P. There has been crazy Christian leaders and crazy atheist leaders. The problem I see is the pursuit of perfectionism, which leaves out most humans. Interesting point. That would be that satanic hubris. Is that maybe there needs to be a sort of humility within Satan of saying, I will create something great for God, but like I'm not going to create something perfect opposing God. And maybe the problem with the extent of the Luciferian movement is that there's this fucking crazy intense anger at Christianity and at the tragedy of being stuck in this world and saying, why hath thou forsaken me? There's that call. It's like, why have you put me in this shit place full of evil and death? And so they're like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to fight our way out of it, and our plan is better than your plan. Your plan for us is fucking horrible and cruel, and it inverts God. It turns God into an evil thing, a demiurge, a liar. You put us here because you hate us. Why would you do that? Why would you put us in a place where we suffer and die? Why do we have to watch our you know negative stuff? Why, in order for us to eat, do animals have to get tortured and killed? And so it's like, all right, we're going to create a future that doesn't need any of that. It's going to be perfect. And what's weird is that perfectionism has within it quite a noble stance. It's like we want to create a perfect world. But what's really weird is when you manifest it, you get all the weird degeneracy that's going on now. And so that's really strange. It's like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's very interesting problem, psychologically. The Enlightenment pedestalized the intellect, putting it out of its proper place, and that's why it runs. When it runs its course, it leads towards murderous consequences by the elites. So this is another problem I'm having: is that like we can't just we can't just conceptualize. Oh fuck! I lost it there. My main. My main. Um, the Enlightenment pedestalized the intellect, putting it out of proper place, and that's why when it runs its course, it leads towards murderous consequences. But so it's this idea that there's this almost this idea of the intellect, the reason, is that you pedestalize this core value of reason, and so reason leads yourself forward. You're like, okay, well, whatever reason says, whatever's rational will bring us forward, whatever's reasonable, whatever's the right way of looking at things, and that becomes the ultimate tool. It's almost like the pedestal becomes what makes sense. But as I said before, it's like the premises underneath reason are almost always informed by Christianity. It's secular Christian morals that still filter into the modern world. Are still getting supported by reason. But eventually reason, and this is what Nietzsche is, Nietzsche just took reason and attacked the premises, and he deconstructed this idea of Christian morality being in any way possible without a heaven above us. So he turned reason on its premises, and then bang, suddenly our reason, yes, becomes this sort of problem then, because it's like the only thing that makes moral sense is supporting evolution, which is destroying the weak and pedestalizing the strong. And yeah, well, like it's you pedestalize the intellect, and it becomes a monster, because the thing that if your premises are not good, the thing that it has to face are insane. Yes, it's the Nietzschean problem. But like again, we blame this on the elites, and I'm wondering, is it really the fucking elites? Like, are the elites doing this, or is this a metaphysical? Is this a mimetic thing? Is this something going on up in the collective unconscious where these tensions are rising, and then they're playing themselves out, and they're just using the elites as their little game? Nietzsche's worldview is one of the crabs in a bucket. The biggest crab eats the other crab, but it's still sat in the bucket. Nothing higher or more virtuous than that. Nietzsche's worldview is that the some crabs are holding the other crabs back, and so what we need to do is kill those smaller crabs and enslave them, and then use them to make a rocket to shoot out of Earth and go explore space. Nietzsche has a brutal worldview. It's very brutal, and as I said before, it's not like it's like this idea of Nietzsche's worldview is right in this sense: is that if you deify equality, equality relates to the idea of entropy. And entropy race, like entropy literally says when you have a system, it eventually leads towards everything balancing out. And life itself is anti entropic. So life is all about resisting that tendency towards balancing, towards equalizing everything else, or flattening everything else. Life, for some reason, pushes against that. And it's like that problem where when you get down to absolute zero, apparently the temperature bounces back up. It can never go to like super zero for some reason, which is crazy. It's always, there's always this shoot towards life. And so Nietzsche says that if you pick a worldview that that positions equality and entropy as a value, you're in essence violating the values of life, which are anti-entropic, which is to be unequal and be unfair and be crazy, powerful and rootless. And so Nietzsche says, well, why don't you stop being a fucking cuck and trying to say I'm a nice guy, so like, but I don't want to accept equality. Why don't you just accept the inequality of life and say, I love it. I love it and all its flaws. And then what that will do is lead you to a position where you're like, all right, we are whoever's on top is the best, and that's just it. And everybody else is less valuable. But hard problem. Yeah, because that's, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that's Nietzsche would have taken Darwin's things to conclusions. Yeah, Nietzsche took all these new ideas, Darwinism, the fucking Earth being a sphere, and the heliocentrism and all that, and he postulated a morality based in it. And it's the one that informs our modern world. This is how, like, people like Richard Dawkins and all that saying that like Christianity is bullshit, but we still have to be compassionate. They're just lying. Like they're just being intellectually dishonest. Nietzsche has ascertained the moral realities of the scientific materialistic worldview. That's the way you should think if you're accepting that. That's scary because eventually that people will start thinking like that. It's very hard for you to be noble unless you believe in an afterlife and the Christian God stuff. And it's not so straightforward that people are just going to dispel that, because unconsciously people always grab onto those problems. Like you take away Christianity and people get into Buddhism and karma. You take away Christianity, people go back into these things because they need that there is that energy. But still Nietzsche presents the problem well. What do you think about Nietzsche's concept that by removing Earth from the center of creation and embracing heliocentrism, man killed God? Yep. Oh yeah, I think about that a lot. I think he's right. Like if the Earth is flat, I think like if say the Earth isn't flat, possibly. Say the Earth isn't flat. Um, why would people want to believe in flat Earth? Well, the reason why they want to believe in flat Earth is because it puts us back in a purposeful place. If the Earth is a tiny speck of dust in the middle of an empty giant universe and it's not special and it's even off on the fringe, like that makes us so trivial. It's like disgustingly tragic. There's no point. Like the problem is so big. It's like, what do we do? Explore the universe. That's a billion-year project. Like, and so heliocentrism does kill God. It just makes God not exist the way we see him as before. So a lot of guys who get into the flat Earth, they're like, I think they're trying to fulfill that desire to have a purpose again. And a lot of people who talk about flat Earth bring God back into it as well. Okay, guys, I'm gonna have to close this up soon. I'll skip through them. Yeah, yeah. Nietzsche's painful to read. Jesus Christ be praised. Is it possible to deify will and not be evil in the Christian sense? Yeah, it's the Colonial Wolf. That's my problem. I'm not sure. Is it possible to deify will and not be evil? I'm not sure. I think to deify your will is an invalidation of having faith in God's will. Like, how can you say, I know where to lead? I know what the future holds. I know where to go with the future, as opposed to having to submit to God will tell me the future. They seem to be juxtaposed, you know? And look, like, There is also that big problem where it's not just the Christians. Like the Christians have that faith in God. The Jews have that faith in the scripture as well. The Jews are enacting their scripture, like, on the money. Like they are really into their scripture too. The Muslims are the exact same. Like all the religious faiths hold that faith in God's will and think God's will is revealed through their scripture. And so they're following that. And that actually makes them a contestable force because they're actually acting the will of their gods out. So that's a weird problem too. What do we do when we unchain the earth from its sun? Whether it moving now, whether we are moving now away from all suns, are we not perpetually falling? Yes. The Bible doesn't say that the earth is flat. In Genesis 1, I can even read it out for you. The Bible says that God created the heaven and the earth, and then he put a dome, a firmament over the earth. So that's, I don't know what to make of that at all. And it was the heavenly waters separated from the earthly waters. Backwards, sideways, forward in all directions. Their knee up and down, left, and saying blah blah blah. Yes, Nietzsche quotes. If anybody's high life, hammer town wins. Scientism is shit, but I don't see why science necessarily has to be anti-God. Scientism is usually just an anti-spiritual, atheistic science religion. Scientism doesn't. It's anti trusting God. That's the problem with scientism. It's like, don't trust God. Don't wait. Do it yourself. And the whole premise, probably the most fundamental premise of God is like, have faith in me. Bang. There's your problem with that. The aristocracy, where are they today? They run the media, they work in politics, they operate beyond morality, and they lie in public. Hillary Clinton is your god, and go worship her. See, it's like the elite isn't just Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton's clearly bad, but is Hillary Clinton really like like is the guys who, like, let's steelman the American system here and say, okay, so the guys who built the nuclear weapons and decided, right, let's go bomb Japan to end the war. That's a very anti-Christian thing to do, is bomb Hiroshima. But maybe it was necessary to end the war. So were these elites making this decision? Like, what were they doing? Were they making a good evil choice, a beyond good and evil choice? It's like, right, we'll have to kill many people, but it's worth that for saving the American soldiers or something like that. But even a better one would be the communist thing, like when Russia, the Soviet Union, and that was clearly an evil regime, was about to take over the world, and the American place fought a lot of proxy wars, like in Vietnam, and they even false flagged it to start it. Like, what? That's a beyond good and evil choice. It's like, oh, we'll fake a war, and then we'll go to war and kill all these Vietnamese people because we need to preserve this country from stopping it going over to communism. Because look what happened in Cambodia and all that shit. Like Cambodia, they just killed a load of people. And so a beyond good evil problem. It's like, it's not necessarily like there's just a load of Hillary Clintons up there. I'm sure there's plenty of them, but there's also good people up there as well, I'm sure. And this becomes more problematic. It's like, are the good people up there acting as moral as they can? Like, do they have their souls tied to morality? Like, the elites are interesting because they're so secretive by their nature. They need to do that to protect themselves, that they're very, very hard to understand and conceptualize properly. Morality is not subjective figment of psychology. It is embedded in the structure of reality in which we exist, much like scientific principles, however, not as immediately necessary after life. I'll have to think about that one a bit, my man. Some years ago, when I was dealing with intense trauma experienced in the body, I became worried about the future of cyborg limbs. I thought, if trauma sits in your body, which part of your entire emotional and psychic being, which is part of your entire emotional and psychic being, what would happen if you lost all your limbs and thus the ability to heal your mind? Sort of sounds alike sounds alike what you mentioned in the beginning. Yeah, um, there's this weird phenomenon with phantom limbs. It's a weird one. So you can get your leg cut off, and then every now and again you get pain in your foot, even though you don't have a fucking leg. And it's because your nervous system has mapped out the archetype of a leg, and it says that there's a fucking leg there, motherfucker. And for some reason, the nerves will get triggered by a set of emotions, smells, and experiences and feelings. It's that type of vibe. And yeah, yeah, like yes, there's a big deal with this. This is a weird one. So what happens when you stick a cyborg leg? Are you gonna are we restricted to the human form? Can the human mind ever code itself to can you ever give yourself extra limbs and stuff like that? Like where oh this is where things become weird. What else can we build ourselves into? I guess this is the transhumanism question, is that okay, say we shed all this Christian morality and go transhuman into the future. Well, what happens then? People are just going to start constructing themselves out of their imagination. It's uh, like what happens when I decide that I want to be 12 foot tall, or I want to be have an IQ of 20 million. And what happens when it's only the billionaires that get to do this first? What happens when I say I want to be immortal? Like these things are going to become very complicated, and the people who don't engage in that are going to be left behind. This is what I'm saying. It's like the people who are succumbing to God's will may get left behind this, but at the same time the people going for this are like are at peak degeneracy. Like they're the people who are like proposing, we all turn into transsexuals, because transhumanism requires you to loosen your conceptualization of tradition. Transhumanism requires you to say, I am not man nor woman. I am not restricted by my biology. It requires you to deny your nature. And transhumanism, for that reason, does actually do something quite evil. It says that your nature is what's holding you back, not your consciousness, not your psychology. And so, yes, there's the dark side. It's not well tooled. Getting hot dogs back. Getting hot dogs. Robotic gamer. Hello, sir. Lucky. There's a conversation going on here. Oops. You can still follow the Nietzschean paganism and still have honor. The samurai, the Norse, the Greeks, were they without honor? No, they were more honorable than anybody, I'd say. Well, the ancient knights were obviously honorable as well. The Greeks were interesting because they're not quite like paganism as it was conceptualized by the Greeks is not the paganism we have today. The Greeks worshipped excellence. We worship equality. The Christians don't worship equality. Now, this is weird. Christian values without the infrastructure of the gods falls into this weird nihilistic entropic equality that we see nowadays. It's like be nice to everybody. But Christianity is not like that really at all. It's Christianity is always trying to shove you in your head and say, sort your fucking shit out. Like look at your own head. And it's about you having faith in God's will and sort of searching in yourself to discover what that is. So that puts you in a different headspace. Whereas ancient Greeks would have been more master morality. They would have just said like excellence is all about this stuff. But they were going down the route of internalizing their consciousness through their extrapolations on reason and their inventions of philosophy and Socrates and all this stuff. And so of course they can have virtues, and pagans were of course virtuous people and important, and they had lots of masculine virtues, but I guess we're dealing with the problem of running these things to their extremes. Is that if if the gods are not real, if the metaphysic is not real, and we default into paganism and all that stuff, we are stuck with the reality of the strongest thing in the world is not a muscly masculine man anymore. It's whoever has the biggest technology, and technology is very, very anti-honorable. It's very, very whoever gets control of that tech, and it's often like a creepy beta male who makes it. You know what I mean? It's like some hunched over shoulder dude who was bullied all through school, and he sits down and he says, I'm going to make Facebook, and then he's like got alien expressions, and his name's Mark Zuckerberg, but he actually pulls off the most amazing thing ever and builds a social media site that everybody uses. And what's really weird about it is yeah, these are the people in charge now, and could you say that they're really honorable men? Well, they're not, because their physiology is all fucked up. They're full of soy. so they end up coding into the game this sort of hate for everything masculine and everything honorable and virtueful. And so when we're redeeming, it's hard to redeem paganism, because that's more going back into traditionalism. And then I don't see why Christianity is not the first thing we default there, because that is our true tradition, I guess. I don't think I did a good job there, but hopefully you see my point. Okay, guys, I'm gonna have to close this. I'm getting lots of stuff. Charlie 85. I just discovered a short film called Lucifer Rising. It contains real ancient rituals from all over the world attempting to call upon him. Yeah, spooky shit, man. Clarissa P. Exactly, or take on a more agnostic view. Open. If Rome was so great, explain why it's so shit now. Christianity, motherfucker. Rome suffered from all the things empires do. They it got too big. Like, there seems to be this tragedy about the world, is that when an empire gets too big, there's always this will within these great empires to become world empires, and after a while they always get too big and collapse in on themselves. And so it's almost like the biblical prophecies were the realization that upon the creation of the first empire, Nebuchadnezzar's, it was that, okay, we've got this thing now where you've built an empire. Eventually these empires are going to get so big and powerful that they're going to become essentially challenges to God's plan. There's something about, we can't lead our empires ourselves. Humans can't figure that out. It's too hard to do it. And so the future will, like, in order to do it properly, God will have to come and teach us how to do it, of sorts. Okay, my friends, I've got to go. I just wanted to get that off my chest. Thank you very much for watching. And boyo fucking alert, boyo fucking over now. I'm going to bounce out now. Thank you for all the comments. Please like, subscribe, share, and drop some comments below if you're reading this after the fact or listening to this after fact. Thank you very much. I'm going to bounce now, and we're going to end it with Mark Zuckerberg. This is the world you want. Bye bye, people. Bye bye.